We have with us in studio, good friend of our show of CRTV, author, filmmaker, Trevor Loudon is here with us. And Trevor, it's good to see you, brother. How are you?
It's great to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
You're working on a documentary about a topic that is very much newsy, topical at the moment, and that is ANTIFA. And a lot of Americans are being introduced to this term, not really knowing who these people are, where they came from. And that's the project that you're working on right now. Give us a little bit of the history that has led to the headlines we're seeing at the moment.
Well, look, ANTIFA really came to light this year with the, since the inauguration. But they've been around for a long time. They started in fascist Italy in the 30s. They were in the 20s. They were involved in fighting the Nazis in before World War II. And they re-arose in Europe, Britain in the 1980s, fighting the skinheads and the National Front and that sort of thing. But what we've found is all over the country, it's like a franchise. You get the local communist group, you get the local anarchist group, and when they want to create some action on the streets, they put on the black masks, they wave the flags, and they are Antifa. Every one of them is connected to a communist group. Every one of them is working with local labor unions, and a lot of them are directly connected to the local Democratic Party. And this is what I think a lot of people don't understand. Antifa is the most active in the Democratic Party cities in Charlottesville, Virginia, in Boston, Chicago, Berkeley, Portland, Oregon, where the Democrats are strong, Antifa is strong because they work very closely together.
Now, you mentioned this is a group that opposes skinheads, racists, Nazis, fascists. I mean, Antifa, as you pointed out, it's derivative of an Italian word meaning anti-fascist. Well, that's, a lot of people would say, what's wrong with that? All the people you just mentioned, those are miscreants, ne'er-do-wells, those are terrible people that are for tyranny, for racism, things that we have spent, a good portion of the last century trying to defeat here through the United States of America. But there's more to the story than that.
Yeah, well, just because you're fighting someone bad doesn't make you good. You can have two mafia clans fighting each other. Doesn't make one good and one bad. So you've got Antifa.
Especially when they fight each other in a way that they're virtually indistinguishable from one another.
Well, they are. Nobody's more fascist than Antifa. They are communist thugs who want to break things and kill people if they get the chance. And they dress themselves up on this moral high ground. We're betting these horrible Nazi fascists. Well, we all despise fascists. We all despise Nazis. You fought a horrible war to defeat them. There are probably about a couple of thousand genuine fascists in this country. Very small, tiny groups of ineffectual losers. Now, Antifa goes after them, but that's not all they go after. There's a concept creep, Antifa, as a tool in some ways of the Democratic Party, as a tool of the organised left, is going after all opposition to their agenda. And that means mainstream Republicans, that means, free speech marchers, that means constitutionalists, just people with normal American values. Because Antifa is completely hardcore communist. They completely oppose all American values. They were chanting the other day, what was it? No Trump, no wall, no America at all. No Trump, no wall, no America at all. Now, is this patriotic? Is this people who can take the moral high ground? They are mindless thugs. They are communists, almost always directed by the local communist movement, often financed and driven by the local labor unions, and in some cases directly tied to the local Democratic Party. They are there as the Nazis used the black shirts to suppress opposition. The mainstream left is using Antifa to shut down anybody who's conservative, anybody who's patriotic, anybody who stands for American values and the Constitution. Antifa is a menace. But the thing is, they would be nothing if they are not backed by local political power bases, and they would be nothing if the government, if President Trump and the federal authorities actually started acting against them. The whole country is crying out for these people to get a spanking. A lot of these people, they break laws on a daily basis, You know, in Europe, Antifa controls whole towns. They regularly raid people's houses and smash people's houses of those who oppose them. They set fire to things in the street. They attack the police. They haven't got quite that bad here, but that's the way it's heading. The only way to stop this is, you know, this is lawlessness. The only way to stop it is with more law, with getting back to the Constitution, actually prosecuting people who break the law, punishing them very severely, and you'll see Antifa fade away to the nothing that they are. Those kids will be back in their mom's basement before you know it.
It sounds to me also, I wonder, Trevor, do you think maybe they're overplaying their hand a bit here from a publicity standpoint? Because these are the kinds of groups that do their best work like cockroaches in the shadows. We've seen this in the past with SCIU. We've seen this in the past with Acorn, that once the light gets shown on these groups and their kind of tactics, a lot of Americans of various persuasions just simply don't want to live in a country where we behave like this in order to advance our ideals and our policies. And I bring this up because just today, the Washington Post, which is considered a beacon of the traditional liberal media, has a headline. I posted this on my Facebook wall today. The Washington Post has a headline today that puts the blame for all the violence at this most recent round of protests all on Antifa, and even says in its headline that they were going after the peaceful protesters on the other side. That, for the Washington Post to go that far, is that indicative of the fact that these folks may have overstayed their welcome to some extent?
Yeah, look, I think they're certainly overplaying their hand. Even Noam Chomsky has come out to criticize them, calling them a gift for the right. So in the last election, the left thought they had it in the bag. They thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. She was going to legalize every legal immigrant in the country. She promised to do that in the first 100 days. That would have given the Democrats anywhere between 8 and 20 million new votes, and they would have had the country. So they had it in the bag. They were just, it was within their grasp, that one-party state they've always wanted. And then they lost the election, and they're like a bunch of kids who thought they were going to get a bike for Christmas and got a pair of socks. And they are angry, and they are wound up, and they're feeding their own frenzy, and the mainstream left is backing them because they are doubling down. They want to create instability in this country, and so that they can basically, the mainstream left is trying to win back the country in 2018 and 2020. And they're letting these thugs go now because they think that will serve their purpose, to intimidate the opposition, to stall the president's agenda, etc. But I think, you know, as you say, they're overplaying their hand, and the silent majority is out there waiting for them to be spanked. And if they're not spanked by the government, they may be spanked at the polls in 2018. We shall see. But right now, I think that it is really, really vital that law enforcement starts dealing with these people before it gets out of hand, before more people are killed. It's only a matter of time before that happens. Americans do not want this lawlessness on their streets. They live in a peaceful, sane country. And the minute we start applying the laws and getting these people off the streets and into the jails where they belong, I think that's when sanity will start to be restored.
Final thing I want to ask you about, you brought up the president, and he is the chief executive officer of the United States. He's the chief executor of our laws. He's taken an oath to defend our Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. You know, one of the reasons why I was dubious of his candidacy last year is I was concerned he'd be way too much of an authoritarian. The whole I alone can solve and all that kind of talk we heard last year. My friend, I would give some really sensitive parts of my anatomy right now for a little authoritarianism, if you know what I'm saying. I never thought for a moment that he would just allow these sorts of thugs use the levies of power of the federal government, the power of the purse, the power of the bully pulpit, do what presidents in the past like Eisenhower and others did when the local states would not enforce the constitutional freedoms and liberties of the law-abiding. That is your job as the president of the United States. Where I would think, listen, this is a president that could use a public approval boost, right? I think Governor Moonbeam out there in California is a pretty nice contrast to most of America. I can't believe he's not picking this fight, Trevor.
Well, look, back in the 60s, when in the South, where you had local government and local police for refusing to protect black civil rights marchers from the KKK, the federal government stepped in and restored order and made sure people's rights were protected. If Donald Trump wants to win and have a great legacy, the best thing he could do now is use, as you say, the power of the purse, every use of the bully pulpit he can to stand against this lawless violence. And if the local authorities don't stop it, to send the federal authorities in to actually do it. He would get cheers all over the country. His approval ratings would go through the roof.
You're right. People want to see these kids spanked. You're right about that.
Republican and Democrat alike. It's an opportunity right now to do it. And like you, I can't understand why a smart man like that is not seizing that opportunity. It's a right thing to do. It's a smart thing to do. It's a political thing to do. And it's the American thing to do.
Trevor, how can people follow your work here? Our audience on CRTV, how can they follow you?
Look, go to my daily blog, trevorloudon.com. Also go and check out my latest movie, The Enemies Within, on enemieswithinmovie.com. We're talking about the infiltration of the Democratic Party by Muslim Brotherhood operatives, by neo-Marxists, the kind of people who have an interest in seeing this Antifa disaster carry on.
I've seen that movie, by the way. I'd highly recommend it. Trevor, it's good to see you, brother. Thanks for coming in.
Look, it's always a pleasure, Steve. Great to talk to you.